EA's first foray into the world of mixed martial arts was considered a minor success with EA MMA. Featuring fighters not contracted by the UFC, EA MMA tried to produce a game that blended the control scheme of its Fight Night series into the digitized world of MMA. The results were mixed at best, leaving some players put off and disappointed. So there was a certain level of trepidation when it was announced that EA would be creating the first UFC game for 8th generation consoles, simply titled EA Sports UFC. After being somewhat underwhelmed with the initial release of EA Sports UFC, I came into the sequel with a sense of apprehension and, to a certain extent, an expectation for disappointment. My expectations were greatly dashed, becoming one of my go-to games on the PS4 from the day it was released until the end of the game's cycle a month before the release of its successor. Before EA Sports UFC 3 was released, some gamers, including yours truly, got the opportunity to play a closed beta that eventually opened up and allowed players to experience the changes, or lack thereof, this latest UFC game had to offer, making me pleasantly surprised and excited for what was to come. Just like the second EA UFC game, UFC 3 provides a good amount of things to entertain oneself both offline and online. After completing the mini tutorial where the player takes control of coverboy Conor McGregor to finish a fantasy bout between himself and Tony Ferguson to help educate the player about the gameplay, UFC 3 reintroduces the amount of variety the player can take part in, including career mode. Like many career modes in the past, EA UFC 3 allows for the player to create a male or female fighter and battle to the top of whatever division of 10 the player chooses. Outside of career mode is the returning knockout mode and live events mode, as well as new modes such as tournament mode and exhibition modifying modes based around KOs and submissions respectively. There are also a pair of online modes featuring the journey toward championship glory, ranked competition, and ultimate team mode, with the latter focusing on building a stable of fighters both potentially real and created. Almost everything UFC 3 has to offer is associated with a trophy or achievement, giving the player an incentive to test out everything EA has provided with this iteration. After nearly 30 hours of playing through the various modes, completing career mode, and winning titles online in both Ultimate Team and ranked competition, I was left with nothing but the grind-heavy leveling trophies associated with Ultimate Team and replaying career mode on the game's hardest difficulty so I can eventually achieve platinum status. After 2 iterations and many improvements across the generation, EA UFC 3 completely changes the basis of its franchise's stand-up fighting system. Gone is the reliance on parrying strikes to complete counters and combos that can knock out an opponent in a flash. In its place is a focus on body movement, bobbing and weaving, swaying, distance judging, and stamina conservation in a slower-paced fashion compared to its predecessors. Rather than sticking with the previous control scheme when it comes to the type of thrown punches being connected to the movement of a character, each type of strike is connected to the face and bumper buttons. Every character's base strikes are mostly the same, with jabs, leg and body kicks, hooks, and uppercuts attached to the face buttons. Pressing the bumper button or buttons alongside the face buttons allows a fighter to throw modified strikes, such as a roundhouse kick or spinning back fist. Holding the left trigger while tapping a face button focuses on body strikes. Using the right analog stick to move and sway the upper body of a fighter to set up a well-timed counter-strike if done right, or a potential knockout for the opposition if a player moves in the wrong direction, really helps this version stand out compared to its predecessors. Unfortunately, the control scheme feels a lot more awkward thanks to these changes compared to its previous offerings, especially when it comes to blocking. In the previous EA UFC games, blocking the head by pressing the right bumper and blocking the body with the right trigger felt natural. Now the player is forced to block the head with the right trigger, and block the body with both the left and right triggers. The input delay when it comes to blocking the body or to catch an incoming body or leg kick is rather annoying at times and can prove to be detrimental. Another issue with the controls is throwing uppercuts. Depending on what arm the player wants to swing with, utilizing an uppercut means tapping one of the punch and kick buttons at the same time, which means instead of throwing an uppercut, the player might use a leg kick, leaving the fighter open to a devastating counter. After a while, these problems don't feel as profound, but the initial hours, especially if someone is used to the old style of gameplay, will be troublesome thanks to the new control setup. Unlike the stand-up portion of the game, nothing has changed when it comes to the ground and clinch action outside of more indicators flashing on the screen that can be turned off in the options menu. UFC 3 utilizes EA UFC 2's simplified grappling system where the player has to hold the right analog stick in one of 4 directions for movement. Thanks to the HUD, the player is told exactly what position in the clinch or on the ground their character will move if the gamer goes left, right, up, or down with the right stick. Just like the grappling in UFC 2, EA UFC 3's transition action is less of a chess match and more of a game of chance, as completed transitions might not be effective as the opposition somehow wins the race to a better position. The windows for blocking and or reversing transitions vary, especially in the online realm. The submission system is based around the gate system where the player on the losing end of a submission would have to move the right analog stick in various directions in hopes of attaining freedom, while the player initiating the submission would try to match the opponent's direction while waiting for a prompt to move the left analog stick in a certain direction to advance the positioning and effectiveness of the hold is back again. The submission system still feels rigid and flawed in execution. There's a new simpler submission system based around mashing one button, but it's pretty bad as well considering it can only be used offline and the AI's meter never moves in comparison to the players to indicate who is winning the submission battle. EA UFC 3 keeps the tradition started in the previous game by featuring a slew of modes to keep one busy both offline and online. First, there's the aforementioned career mode, where a player can take either a created fighter or a real UFC fighter through the ranks in hopes of not only winning the world title, but also becoming the greatest of all time, by accomplishing certain criteria such as going on an undefeated streak or breaking pay-per-view buy rates, all the while attempting to avoid enough damage in fights to stop the deterioration of the longevity bar. Between the fights is what makes this iteration of career mode the best one yet, as the player can choose to spend the weeks leading up to their fight building up a following of fans through means such as tweeting and holding after parties, to visiting various gyms to learn specific moves a la the best part of EA MMA's career mode and gym traveling. There are video montages, random updates courtesy of the UFC Minute, and even tweets from fans who either love or hate the player's character. There are problems with career mode, including the adaptive AI continuously boosting their stats alongside the player's character, meaning by the time the player's character reaches the top of whatever division their fighter is a part of, they'll be taking on opponents with ridiculously high stats. By the mode's end, it just becomes random fights without much hype until either the player achieves GOAT status or their longevity bar wears down to nothing to force them into retirement. Even with its flaws, this is the first EA UFC career mode that might entice someone to play it again. Also for offline players is the returning knockout mode, which is exactly what it sounds like. A player or players can pick 2 fighters to stand up and go to war in this UFC version of Horse, where each character has a specific number of bars representing one's health. With each significant shot comes a dwindling of the bar until one character is in the fetal position. Knockout mode is a fun party mode where friends can sit around and see who goes down first. Why knockout mode isn't offered online is beyond comprehension, as it would be incredibly fun online just as much as it is offline, especially considering Snoop Dogg is the special guest commentator for the mode this time around. There are another pair of complementary modes for offline players, including Stand and Bang, which is KO mode without the meter or Snoop Dogg, and Submission Shootout, a grappling-only fight ending in a submission. But they don't have the same level of pure fun as Knockout mode. Custom Events mode, where you can create and play your own custom fight cards, is also back alongside the new tournament mode and even custom fights for exhibition battles where the player can have fighters with even stats or an AI opponent featuring max damage potential. And then there's the online portion of the game. Not shocking, quick fight and ranked online modes return, with the latter focusing on the player not only winning titles, but also moving up through the numbered divisions, where the higher the division, the harder the real-life competition. Connections and finding fights are usually strong and easy respectively, though I've witnessed a few laggy encounters. The biggest addition to EA UFC 2's online offerings returns here in Ultimate Team mode. In EA UFC 2, Ultimate Team mode allowed the player to create up to 5 fighters to battle other online competitors with the intent of moving up the leaderboard, earning coins, and becoming a champion while attaining or purchasing card packs that contain moves, supplementary items, and perks. In EA UFC 3, Ultimate Team focuses not on created fighters, but randomized real UFC fighters, taking one of the 4 slots depending on the division that fighter is associated with: lightweight, middleweight, heavyweight, and women's bantamweight divisions. These randomized fighters are attained from card packs that can be earned by the player leveling up their team through completed fights, spending coins earned from those completed fights to buy packs, or using real money to buy EA points to purchase those packs. Thankfully, the player doesn't need both points and coins to buy packs this time around, but buying with coins costs usually 10 times more than buying with points. Attained fighter perks are limited to a certain number of fights, while moves are unlimited. Also changed is the division title rankings. Instead of having every division separated by character wins and losses, the chance of fighting for Ultimate Team gold solely depends on a 3-fight winning streak, culminating in a title fight. But for all the improvements and changes to the benefit of Ultimate Team mode, there's one crushing modification: a lack of created fighters. The original premise of Ultimate Team mode in EA UFC 2 was using created fighters to take on other created fighters. In EA UFC 3's version, created fighters in UT mode are strictly connected to tokens, a new implementation to the mode where the player must sacrifice a variety of items, be it high-level moves, perks, or even fighters, or play the various solo challenges to attain tokens that can be redeemed to purchase randomized created fighter cards. One of the key words in that previous statement is randomized. Every fighter attained in a card pack has a random set of stats and, most importantly, a randomized fighting style. One person could get a striker-based Conor McGregor in one pack. Another could be based around grappling. The same goes for the created Ultimate Team fighters. This takes away the freedom and fun from the last game, where a player could choose how they wanted their created fighter to fight out of the gate and modify them as they saw fit in Ultimate Team mode. While some might condemn the mode as pay to win, the fact is this version of Ultimate Team mode is more disappointing for hindering the key thing that made the original iteration so great: using created fighters built from the ground up to take on other created fighters built from the ground up. Then whether or not someone is using a jacked up character with purchased gold star moves and perks. There are also the aforementioned solo challenges and a single player aspect of Ultimate Team mode to get those tokens and card packs, but neither are a fulfilling experience. The graphics, which were a highlight in the last game, are somehow better this time around, especially the created fighters when put side by side with the real fighters. The animation can get a little janky at times, with clipping and unbelievable falls, but nothing close to the ridiculousness of the original EA UFC. The commentary, courtesy of Joe Rogan and John Anik, is rough, with fighters getting called by the wrong names, repetitious commentary, and moments when Anik might ask Rogan a question and gets no response. There's so much to enjoy about EA Sports UFC 3, but certain aspects when it comes to both the modes, such as EA focusing on real fighters at the expense of created fighters in Ultimate Team, and the grappling system having the same problems as the last game, really drags it down from being the greatest of all time into something a gamer would consider just another contender. The third iteration in this now 4-year-old franchise is nothing short of a mixed bag. For previous EA UFC players, the change in how the stand-up works might be a major turnoff, but those coming in with an open mind will definitely find great joy in improving their fisticuffs game the more someone plays. For newcomers, the control scheme and overall flow both on the feet and on the ground might be a little too overwhelming. There are a slew of modes to keep things fresh, but the biggest draw when it comes to online competition in Ultimate Team doesn't fully improve upon its predecessor, while career mode is worlds better compared to the previous iterations. Coming from a dedicated EA UFC 2 player, this is definitely worth a rental to see if the game clicks with you. Overall, it's a lot more enjoyable if you're someone ready to adapt and accept change. But there are definitely glaring flaws that makes EA UFC 3 stand out as something not worthy of a full-priced purchase.
Look, you see how he slapped you? Boop, boop. He's out. Oh, yeah. That's a wrap. Finito. Whatever you want to call it, done dinner, done deal. That's a wrap. See ya.